Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Warwick F1 Show. Today we are talking about the Azerbaijani Grand Prix, a race perhaps unlike any other we've seen in years. We had a 30-lap battle for the lead between Oscar Piastri and Charles Leclerc, with Sergio Perez waiting in the wings for any drama that would unfold between the front two. But it did prove in the end to be Perez himself who was having the drama with his collision with Carlos Sainz, putting them both out of the race and promoting George Russell to the podium. Behind that, Norris trying to make up for the unfortunate incident in qualifying, placing him down, starting the race in 15th, but was able to climb to 5th and crucially gain more points on Max Verstappen in the title battle. I'm joined today by Callum and Katch, and we'll just be going through the race, going through what has happened, and obviously everything that unfolded. So, as we normally do, rating the race out of 10. Katch, I'll come to you first. Obviously, a McLaren fan, we did see a McLaren victory in the end with Oscar Piastri. Maybe not the driver that you were hoping for, but what would you give that race out of 10?
Hello. So I do want to slightly correct Norris came fourth, but only a minor point. I think honestly, best race of the season. We've had some amazing ones. It has been a season, especially the second half. It is turning out to be as dramatic and as exciting as we were hoping. So I want to give it an 8.5. 8's too low. 9, I think. I don't know. I'm switching between an 8.5 and a 9, I think, because it just had so many amazing elements. But I don't think it's a classic, possibly. Yes. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. Maybe about an 8.5 out of 10. I'd say I don't want to say the best race this season. I still think that in my heart that sits with Silverstone, just because of the story that gave us and Hamilton's comeback after many years of obviously not winning and Mercedes being poor. But I think in terms of, from a neutral perspective, in terms of the battle that we got and having so many different drivers fighting for the win, that made it the best race this season without a doubt, and really gives us an indication of how open this championship battle is getting. And so I think for me, 8.5 out of 10, maybe even 9 out of 10. It was, I think, thrilling from start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, I think 8.5 out of 10 is probably fair. You were seeing a battle for the lead for 30 laps, and we've seen battles for the lead far more this season than we've probably seen in 9 out of the last 10 years prior to that. But this one, it just lasted a lap after lap, and you never knew kind of whether Leclerc was going to catch Piastri. There were laps where he was a lot closer. He almost kind of made those moves, and maybe it's brought down a little bit by the fact that it almost didn't happen, that there wasn't kind of that overtake. But otherwise, it was a brilliant drive from Piastri, a brilliant drive, I think, from Leclerc, and understandably, who was disappointed kind of not to come out with the win. And yeah, it's just kind of symptomatic of what this season has become, a battle for the lead almost at every race, where you're seeing 4 or 5 or 6 or even 7 drivers potentially at the start of a weekend thinking they can go into, or they can leave the race with a podium, with a race win. And I think that is just shows how far this season has kind of developed, and especially when you consider what we were all kind of looking at the start of the season in terms of kind of whether we thought Red Bull would be doing a clean sweep of victories. But I mean, Katch, Oscar Piastri, this was probably the race that kind of repaid Hungary, the race that you cannot deny in any way, shape or form that on merit he deserved to kind of win this race. There were no kind of external factors. He drove the best race he could, and obviously ended with the podium.
Exactly. I think Hungary, obviously we've talked about it a bit, it's all a bit controversial still, and I think that's where the McLaren criticism came in. And coming into this weekend, we obviously knew there was a lot of talk about team orders and McLaren and Piastri having to step back now, and Norris being the number one driver because he is ahead of the championship. And if there is to be a championship title fight, it would be Norris versus Verstappen. So there was all that speculation and criticism, and I think slightly fair criticism on McLaren, because they haven't played these orders before. So coming into this, we all expected, right, Norris will be up ahead and Piastri will play second fiddle, and is that unfair on Piastri? Yes, but it's the role he has to play. And then qualifying, it all got flipped on the head with Norris sadly going out, qualifying P17, as you said, starting 15th, Piastri starting second. At that point, it was down to him. He had a point to make. We know he's a good driver. But the doubt was there with Leclerc starting on pole again. Was he going to complete it? Was he going to finally get pole to victory in Baku? But no, just speaking about Piastri, that dive he made, even he said it was a 50-50 chance. It was a lunge from so far back. That takes guts, that takes balls, and he had that. He had the confidence in himself, in the car, and just in the situation to be like, right, I'm going to go for this. He waited for a bit, he went for it, and then to hold Leclerc and Perez, who are both so much more experienced, back like that and defend the way he did, it was such a dominant drive, and I think there's no doubt anymore that even if, let's say for the rest of this season, Norris does qualify ahead, and let's say that he may have to do a couple of team orders, no one can doubt Piastri's ability. That was a deserved win. It was, I think, satisfying for him and for everyone. For once, we could have a McLaren win with no controversy. For once, thank gosh. So, and it was just, I think it was the nail on the coffin was that win plus Norris's fourth took McLaren to the top of the constructors. So it kind of was just a nice weekend, and Piastri is going to go just home so satisfied. His mum was also there. His mum was there to see the win. That makes me so happy. Oh, it was just, it was really good. I'm sad for Leclerc, but it was still a great haul of points, which brings him into the conversation. But yeah, Piastri, I think he deserved that so much.
You are indeed right that the Leclerc curse in Azerbaijan does continue, with this being his fourth pole that he could not convert into win, but certainly amazing for Piastri. I think this reminded me a lot of what Zandvoort was for Norris in a way, because obviously Norris got his first win in Miami earlier this season, and there was still obviously it was a brilliant drive from him, and we have no doubt about his talent, but there was still some critics saying, yes, there was that safety car, he got very lucky in the race, and Zandvoort was almost his response to that, winning by something like, what was it, plus 20 seconds, and completely dominating the race. And I feel like that is what this race exactly was for Piastri. Such a dominant drive, again, from a driver that we should also state is only in his second season in F1, something which is absolutely phenomenal from, as I say, a driver with that lack of experience. And yeah, I think especially with that drive, he demonstrated such maturity. As the commentators were saying, we didn't see a single lockup, I think maybe one slide in sector 3 or something like this. And that's about it. And that's all the talent that was necessary to bring home that win. And I think it really can't be understated just what a incredible performance this was from Piastri, and a much deserved win.
Yeah. And I think also, you said this is only a second season. We also can't forget, he took a year out between winning the F2 title and these 2 seasons. He didn't drive an F1 car for a whole year.
Probably did a gap year and came back and literally incredible with McLaren.
He's insane. And he just, the talent that he had in that drive, because he also, not only did he make like 0 mistakes, like you said, he also held tyres and pulled a gap at the end. I know that Leclerc's rear tyres fell off, sure, but he still pulled a gap. He still went fast right at the end. So that tyre management, man, incredible.
Well, yeah, I know. I think the winning gap was over 10 seconds, and that's like, aside from Norris's win in Zandvoort, that's like the first gap of over 10 seconds since probably like very early on in the season. I think that I completely echo kind of what you guys have said. Like it was an incredible drive, especially when you've got the pressure not just from Leclerc but also from Perez as well. I think the team orders thing is kind of interesting for me because you did see at the start of the weekend like McLaren say, "Oh, we are going to be prioritizing Norris a bit more in the battle for the drivers' championship." And obviously that kind of wasn't an issue for in terms of this race because obviously Norris unfortunately got knocked out in Q1, so kind of attention was on Piastri. But I think ultimately that's exactly the kind of team dynamic that you want at the moment. If Norris can't do well for whatever reason, they've got a second driver who can win races, can perform. And I think at this point, when you look at the level that McLaren are at and when you look at the level Red Bull are at, like this is a genuine title battle. And I think McLaren would be it would be silly for them not to prioritize Norris in these circumstances. So I do think that you will maybe see some races where Norris is maybe given that preferential treatment. He is let past by Piastri to kind of go for those higher points finishes. But this is just demonstrating that for next year, it won't be like that. McLaren will revert kind of back to how they previously done it because Piastri is clearly a driver that can win races, can dominate, and realistically, if McLaren come out of the blocks in 2025 next year with a car that is as good, if not better, and you'd almost have to say it could be better with the level of development that they've kind of demonstrated over the last kind of year and a half, then you're going to have a situation where it will be two drivers kind of competing with one another for the world title. There won't be a number one and number two. It will be like a Hamilton and Rosberg back in the early Mercedes days. Hopefully, maybe not with the level of animosity that eventually developed into. But I think for the time being, this is perfect for McLaren because Piastri is there, can win. Realistically, they do want to and maybe should prioritize Norris for the Drivers' World title because I would say the Constructors is not wrapped up, but it's looking very good. And I think this just demonstrates Piastri's level of talent, as we've been saying, and that he is clearly going to be, if McLaren can keep putting together a car that can perform, is clearly going to be a competitor for the driver's title next year.
I think this is exactly the race that McLaren needed as well after Monza. Obviously, after Monza, I don't think anyone was expecting how good the Ferrari upgrade package was going to work. And we saw signs of that as well in Azerbaijan. Obviously, Leclerc getting pole, and the Ferraris did look incredibly strong. And this is exactly the result they needed to bounce back in the Constructors' Championship. Obviously, they're now leading that, which is a huge result for them. We knew inevitably that was going to happen at some point, but it's a huge confidence boost. Yes, maybe it was a little bit of luck with Sainz crashing out, obviously, at the end, and Perez crashing out at the end as well. So that's a huge points loss for Ferrari and for Red Bull that McLaren didn't really have much of a say in. That just sort of happened out of their control. And that means that they managed to score. And obviously Norris was promoted to P4 as well, which means that he gets more points from potentially where he was down in P6. And that's a great recovery drive as well, we should say, from Norris, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But I think since Monza, this is really the race that they needed to regain momentum for this championship battle and remind everyone that they are still there and they are still probably the favourites, to be honest, even though the Ferraris are certainly getting stronger.
Yeah, I think because obviously we've mentioned McLaren lead the Constructors now, and with that unfortunate crash, they are now 20 points ahead of Red Bull, which it was going to be less, but 20 points is a margin, and Ferrari are catching. It would have been a massive point haul for Ferrari. This upgrade package, like you've mentioned, has worked so much better than we expected, and it just means that this Constructors battle will get spicy, because I don't see, as much as Red Bull are, I'm not going to say falling off now, but they're not developing, but they've lost pace. They've lost something. I don't know what it is. I think someone might know. I have no idea. But they're obviously looking like they could go down to third. So the constructors is going to get spicy. I don't know about the drivers. As I have a stake in the battle with being a Norris fan primarily, I don't want to say we're in a title battle because that just will increase my anxiety. So if I just pretend we're not in a title battle, that's fine. Max is still very much ahead. If Leclerc can overtake and do the title battle with Max, I actually won't be disappointed because I won't have any anxiety. So that's fine. But I think I just want to mention that Singapore, I think if we are to do the drivers' battle, Norris should statement win or at least come second because we have that month's gap. We have a whole month between Singapore and the US.
Well,
so next weekend is the final chance to properly stamp the foot down and be like, right, we are going for both.
I think we were talking about this before the start where we mentioned that Norris does, if he is going to start actually closing on the drivers, he needs to start getting wins and second places where Verstappen is down in sort of 5th, 6th or lower. And Singapore is obviously the best chance to do that. We know that Red Bull struggled around Singapore last year, and that was in a car that was unbelievably dominant. And so when their package at the moment is not working already, then Singapore could bring about even more of a deficit for that as well. So I think next race is going to be in Singapore is going to be really important for Norris if he wants to make a statement on the Drivers' Championship, and because he needs more of those kind of results where not only is he completely dominating, but also Verstappen is not doing as well, dropping back to the lower end of the points so that he can make up this almost 60-point gap that he has still to Verstappen in front.
Well, I mean, I think we could probably bring in kind of Norris's and I guess Verstappen's performances because they are kind of so linked to one another. And I mean, you always look at it as Katch said, in terms of statements. And when you've got a McLaren that is starting, or Norris that's starting in 15th versus a Verstappen who was starting in 5th or 6th?
6th.
But 6th place. But either way, kind of nine positions apart. And you know that Norris needs to kind of get 8 points a weekend to kind of close the gap. You're thinking this potentially could be a very, very almost a death blow to kind of Norris's chances. But he comes out the weekend, he gains 3 points. Obviously, it's not 8, but when you consider what it could have been after Saturday, that's a brilliant result for Norris, and it's very much a line in the sand of I can start 10 or so places behind you and still finish ahead of you if everything goes right. And I can't see there not being at least 1 or 2 weekends where McLaren are on form, Norris is on form, and Verstappen is kind of like in no man's land, as he seems to have been for like the majority of the last few races, with the exception of Zandvoort.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you've almost got to say that it is a title battle because it's still, the gap is still, I think it's 59 points with 7 races to go, plus 3 sprint races, which obviously are another source of points for both Verstappen and Norris. It's about 8.5 points a race, but if you get one race where Norris wins and Verstappen only comes 6th or 7th or whatever, that's 18 points. That's almost a race win, basically. And then you've got to a point where if let's say Verstappen, or let's say Norris does that twice and Verstappen comes 6th, 18 points, 30, if you times that by 2, 36 points, the gap's suddenly 23 points. That's less than a race win. And there's still five or so races to go. This is very much a title battle, and I think whoever wins it will have done exceptionally well. If Verstappen can hold on, it'll be a very like Button-esque 2009 where he's kind of gained all his points at the start and then just held on as the car has kind of fallen away. And equally, if Norris manages to overcome, I think, the points gap that existed at the start of the season, regardless of the fact that realistically the McLaren is much better probably than the Red Bull at the moment, that will be an incredible thing. And I do think now that this championship will come down to the last race of the season, whether there will be less than a 25-point gap between Verstappen and Norris, and we'll end up perhaps with some more Abu Dhabi kind of drama involving Max Verstappen.
Oh, do not do that.
No, pop off with the maths. I love that. Honestly, yeah, I completely forgot sprint races existed. To be honest, I forgot they were a thing.
You've still got 4 more of them left, so that's plenty of opportunities for Norris.
Yeah, true. So with Norris in the title battle, I want to just I think the perspective on whether, because you mentioned it will be incredible if Max holds on, and it will be incredible if Norris gets the title. Both I think are correct, but I think it also stands on what your perspective of the drivers are, because if you are a person who supports Red Bull more, you will be hating on Norris no matter what. There's so much Norris hate. And I think for the neutrals as well, you expect Max to hold on. I think even now, even with his performances, I still expect Max to hold on because it's Max Verstappen. He is one of the best drivers. You've got to admit now, he is up there. So, in a car...
I think it's a combination of Max is very good, and I still, I know this, is maybe, it's not hating, but I still think Lando has that inconsistency.
Oh, 100%. As a Lando fan, he has that inconsistency. 100%. Sure, he's made up he's made up positions on the first lap now, which was a criticism, but he had to start all the way back in 15 to do it. I can be happy, but also realism, man. He's got inconsistency. Well, I'm not going to say this qualifying was inconsistency because it was a screw up on the FIA side. I still believe that, but he needs to be more consistent to have a chance, to have a realistic chance. He can make statements like Zandvoort, that's absolutely fine, but he needs to not make mistakes in other ways. He needs to kind of bring his performances together, solidify everything. He's got all the individual parts to consistently get podiums, which he does, but consistently get race wins. And we just haven't seen that yet. I'm looking forward to when we can see that, because he is kind of ready. It's just the final icing on the cake. And I think with the confidence that Max and Red Bull really aren't doing great right now, maybe that will boost his confidence and give him that final push to bring it all together. Do it at a track like Singapore that he's done well at, he likes. McLaren pretty much like as well. So I can see it all working out, but it's still just... there's still places to go. You can't say he's at the level of Max at the moment. You still can't.
I can see it working out, and Norris still being as inconsistent as he is, frankly, at the first half of the season, which, frankly, is a testament just to how bad Red Bull have been. I mean, in Azerbaijan, Red Bull were easily the third fastest team, maybe even the fourth fastest team in their car, I would say. Will disagrees with me on that. I think they were. I think, once again, Verstappen is... or for the most part, this season's been dragging the car up, and maybe yes, Perez was very good this race, but I think Red Bull, I can see them really only just getting worse in a way. I think Singapore, they will be very, very poor, and I think in a way McLaren have also, I want to say they've been lucky that it has been as open as it has, and that we have had other race winners such as Mercedes perhaps taking off points from where Red Bull might have got a win or might have got some second places, which would have boosted both their drivers and their championship hopes. But we feel like we're in a very odd position where certainly in championships gone by, we've had two drivers maybe giving it all they have and getting consistent first and second places, but it's felt really scrappy this season, and no one's been... I think I remember us saying around the summer break, no one has been perfect, and so it's almost now just a case of who is the least worst in a way, because no one has been... That feels very harsh to say, because everyone has been... That feels very harsh to say, but compared to, say, 2021...
Yes.
where it was two drivers and they were just going at full pace for the entire season. And then compared to this season where Norris has been inconsistent, the Red Bull car has been inconsistent and has dropped off majorly in pace, which means that Verstappen hasn't been able to, like, even though he has been dragging that car up, obviously, it's still not been enough often. Ferrari are only just coming into it now. Mercedes have had their moments, but not really been anywhere near the front for the large majority, maybe a few races in the middle with Austria and Silverstone. And so it just feels a very different feeling as to what a championship battle should be, is what I'm trying to say.
I think Ferrari are going to rue that period in kind of the middle of the season, almost that period like overlapping with where Mercedes were good, where like Leclerc in Canada wasn't able to get points, in Silverstone wasn't able to get points, in Austria didn't get points. If Leclerc had got even reasonable points at each of those races, this title battle could potentially have been a three-way one. I think unless Max has about, I think, 2 DNFs at this point, I wouldn't say Leclerc's in the title battle. But it's the fact, I think, that we're talking about a 59-point gap as very not easily being able to be overcome. But you look back to previous seasons, like 2021, for example, you had, I think it was a 30-something point gap for Verstappen going into Silverstone, and you're looking at that and it's like, oh, championship's over, they can't overcome that. And it is just those different perspectives. And I think it is the fact that because there are so many kind of teams involved, a good weekend, realistically, let's say in 2021, because Verstappen and Hamilton were so far ahead of the rest of the grid, a good weekend for one would mean P1, a kind of worse weekend for the other would mean P2, so 7 points. These days, if you do a good weekend, you potentially win. If you have a bad weekend, you're 8th. Like, the point swings are so much larger. And again, that shows, I mean, this season has been kind of incredible. Easily, I mean, the best season in terms of kind of a title battle since 2021. One of the most competitive seasons in terms of race wins ever. I think it's the first time 4 teams have won multiple races in a season since 1977.
Really?
It's unprecedented. We've six
Yeah,
winners
when was the last time we had 7 different race winners? I mean,
be 2012.
Well,
Yeah.
Okay, yes, yeah. So it's
still
certainly
a
a very
lot.
unique.
Yeah.
But we've had 6 winners in the last 8 races.
Yeah.
The only multiple winners being Oscar Piastri and Lewis Hamilton. I'd like to point that out quickly.
You started that segment just so you could say that.
Oh my
didn't you?
gosh.
But it just developed into it. But I just think this season has been incredible, and because the Red Bull realistically has fallen off, it is solidly, I think, competing with the Mercedes now in that kind of A tier, whereas probably the McLaren and the Ferrari are in that A+ tier of car performance. And it's Verstappen that's dragging the car from A into A+, as opposed to Red Bull.
Yes, I do agree.
That's where the kind of level of driver performance comes in.
Yeah, I think because the other teams have had 2 solid drivers, this is the first weekend that we could say Red Bull have had 2 drivers that have performed to the level they could within the car. The first time this season we're saying this properly, or like within the battle. But I think for me personally, the excitement of the season hasn't been, oh, there's a title battle, this is exciting. Like Abu Dhabi was exciting because of the title battle and because we had 2 incredible drivers, which meant there was incredible races. For me, the season has been so good because all the races have been so unpredictable. We go into a race weekend not knowing who could win, not knowing which teams will dominate. And for me, that's the exciting part of it. Take all the tables out the way. We're going into Singapore, like, Red Bull will be probably weak. Ferrari have done well in the past. McLaren could do well because they're on form. Who knows, George Russell could suddenly do something amazing. We don't know. Like, that's the exciting part for me.
Yeah. And I guess we've mentioned the two Red Bulls there, and we'll maybe move on to kind of the incident that put paid to one of them, and that was the collision on lap 40. I think it was 47
50.
or 48
It was
between.
50. No, it was lap 50. It was the second to last lap, because then it went under VSC for the final lap.
Okay.
Yeah, we did finish under VSC, didn't we? I think that was.
Yeah.
Turns out we can do that. No, I'm not bringing that back up.
I agree.
Quick aside, I do see people talking like that on Twitter, and I'm like, it was now 3 years ago. Not saying we have to move on, but like.
But you do have to move on,
yeah,
yes.
It's a bit petty every time we bring it up. But either way, moving back to the point. Yeah, so Sergio Perez genuinely had his best weekend since Japan, probably. Was competing realistically. I think realistically for the podium, he was always kind of the third man watching the battle for the front. But if they'd had a collision, would have probably gone on to win that race. Obviously, does love the Baku circuit. Has more podiums there than Verstappen and Hamilton combined, which was a shocking stat that I didn't realise was a thing.
That's nice.
That doesn't sit well with me personally.
I don't like that.
But unfortunately wasn't able to add to it at this race. Just quick rundown of the incident. So Leclerc's tyres, having followed Piastri for kind of 20, 25, 26 laps at this point, had kind of given up. And Leclerc was falling back into the clutches of Perez and Sainz, who had kind of got to the top three into the end of the race. Perez goes for a move at turn one. Leclerc kind of forces him wide. That allows Sainz the opportunity to get up the inside, take third place. Sainz then goes for a move himself on Leclerc on corner two. Again, has to run a bit wide, which gives Perez the opportunity to come back up the inside. And then as they're going up the straight, both trying to gain the slipstream, Perez's front right tyre hooks with Sainz's rear left, and they spear off into the barrier on the straight. Callum, I know we were speaking about this before we started. I kind of know your kind of views on this. Katch, do you think that it was a racing incident? Do you think anyone was particularly at fault?
So I have watched it from both angles, both I'm on board so many times. You cannot put blame on one of them, I don't think. If you do, I think it's really harsh for me. If you put blame on one driver for that, for me something went wrong in Ferrari's car, because there is no way it veered to the left like it did when Sainz's steering wheel was straight. So I know that they caught the back. Like, there's questions about, maybe Perez should have been more aware, or Sainz should have been more aware. So, yeah, with all of that, it has to be a racing incident. It would have been too harsh. Both of them in DNF, they both crashed when they were fighting for a podium. That's a penalty enough. We do not need to penalise either of them anymore. So, racing.
Yeah, it was one of the oddest incidents I think I've ever seen, really. It was just like, they're driving in a straight line, and all of a sudden they've just been, as you mentioned, or I'd like to quote Will Kingswood, they've been sucked together, and then before colliding into the wall. I think that does actually perfectly describe it, and it's, I think both drivers weren't expecting it from the other, and yeah, just unlucky. I think there's no reason to penalise either of them. It was just was what it was, as a bit of entertainment for the last bit of the race.
No, I completely agree. It's a pure racing incident for me. I think, although Sainz's wheel is straight, I just think the way, like, obviously as you exit the corner, you're not necessarily exiting it like 90, like completely parallel with the walls. So just even if you've got a tiny amount of kind of original exit, like direction, that will exacerbate itself, even if you hold your wheel straight as you go along. And I just think maybe they were both kind of not paying enough attention to each other, and were kind of a bit more focused on Leclerc up front, trying to get his slipstream, get a good run into turn three. And I think,
yeah, exactly, because it was, me and the commentators, everyone were like, it was confusing in a way, because Sainz had overtaken Perez, like you mentioned, Sainz overtaken Perez the corner before, and then he went to go overtake Leclerc, and Leclerc dive bombed. So I originally thought it was Leclerc that got caught up in it. I thought it was Leclerc that crashed. And then I was like, wait, no. Leclerc's up the road. What's happened? It was just so confusing from all sides.
I think at the end of the day, we're talking about extremely minute moves by the drivers on their steering wheel. Obviously, they're both focusing on Leclerc up ahead to try and get the slipstream. That's obvious. That's why they're both occupying that sort of right-hand section of the track. And I think it was just very unlucky that it just happened that what the two drivers wanted to do in that single, very small moment in time was occupy the same space of track. And like you say, neither of them were really expecting it, probably, especially as it was on a straight. Neither of them were thinking that either of them were going to be doing anything really apart from just driving in a straight line. So I think it's racing incident. There's no reason to punish either drivers, as Katch and you will have said.
I think it's almost the fact that it's so like you go on Twitter and see some people arguing one way, some people arguing the other. You're almost like it is therefore a racing incident, because I think they're both there's kind of a little bit of responsibility on both sides. Perez can use more of the track on the left hand side, but equally Sainz maybe shouldn't be, even if it's so kind of slight, he shouldn't be moving over as there is a car up his left hand side. I just think they're kind of there's blame on both sides, and ultimately I think it's disappointing for Perez in particular, who like had a good race. He was beating Verstappen on merit, and I don't think we can say that he has done that since probably Baku last year. And it is a shame that he wasn't able to get points out of that.
I don't know what happens to Perez at Baku. He obviously just picks up some kind of magic spell that just deducts a few tenths from his lap time or something. He really does love that track, and like you say, it was a shame that after all of that, Chinmay must be angry as well, because he didn't get his 3-point prediction of him and Perez both out qualifying and outpacing and finishing above Verstappen on the track. Yep. Him doing it probably because he thought it was a great joke, let alone did he think that was actually a possibility and actually going to happen. But yeah, very unfortunate for Perez, who a weekend that he definitely seemed to have regained some confidence and was on for a great points haul, and in the end it all came to nothing.
I think it's interesting because I think I heard Perez saying that he had more confidence going into this weekend because it was obvious now that the car had issues that he'd been saying before, that Verstappen was now facing these issues with the Red Bull. So, I don't know what to make of that he's now confident because Verstappen is doing badly, because it shows that the Red Bull's actually bad.
So hang on. So what you're saying is that he's confident now because when he inevitably performs badly, he can blame something else, and so the media is not directly looking at him, and that's why his confidence is being built up. Okay, fair enough. You got to respect him for being honest. That's a bit odd. But...
I do kind of understand. I do actually kind of understand that, because when you've gone into last season, after 4 races, it was obviously after 4 races, but he was still level on points with Verstappen or 1 point behind. And then you spend the next 18 months getting royally trounced by your teammate. Like that sort of thing it must obliterate your confidence. And especially, I think, into this season as the car has gotten worse, and obviously Perez hasn't been able to perform as well as I think a lot of people were expecting of him, then it is almost like, is it me? And now that not that it isn't him, but that it is also maybe the car, it can be like, oh, it wasn't all me, it was the car as well. Maybe I am better, and then your confidence starts to come back, and then you will start to perform a bit better. And we see drivers operating on confidence all the time, and if you don't have it, then it can be a real killer in terms of performance. And I will bring back up Logan Sargent, because I just don't think he ever had the confidence, and that was a big part of maybe why he didn't perform in that Williams seat.
Yeah, I haven't talked about Logan on the pod, I think, but yeah, I do agree. He just never had the confidence. He never. Sure, he didn't have the car in some circumstances, that he was a few upgrades behind, and he didn't have all the advanced parts that Alex does and did. But yeah, he just didn't have the confidence. But that kind of has to be put on him. You go into a season, you need to restart, and he was given a chance at a second season. And he made mistakes, he did crashes, he just didn't perform, and sure, that knocks your confidence, but you need to be on it from day one when you're on equal footing. And then obviously they're going to prioritise Alex when you've got a history of not having the confidence and destroying the new parts. So it was inevitable to me.
I just think for Sargent and then also for Perez, it can kind of become a slippery slope in terms
100%.
of like
No, I
you
do.
don't have the confidence, then you don't perform, then you lose kind of that performance, then you lose more confidence, and you perform less, and just
It's
so on
a
and so on
slippery
and so on.
slope of
Yeah.
lack of confidence, and that just it's a infinite cycle of just badness.
But I hope Perez can kind of perform to this level, because it was good to see him up there. Like, he was there on merit. Like, no one can take that away from him, regardless of maybe how it ended up. And if he can perform in Singapore, obviously maybe not to the level that he did in terms of the rest of the field, because I don't think many people are thinking that Red Bull will be great. But if he can beat Verstappen, and he was going to before this crash, there's no doubt in anyone's mind that that was going to happen. If he can beat Verstappen, then it can build up his confidence again, and he probably needs it to demonstrate that he should still be in the seat. And if he can fight back, and maybe even at one race take points away from McLaren. But with the title kind of coming down to the wire, that could be the difference at this point.
This is the problem now for Perez, though, because obviously they've given him the second half of the season to prove himself, and he's probably gone to Red Bull and saying like, "Oh, so you're going to give me a good car, right?" And it's just not happening anymore, and so he's not being given the equipment to be able to perform at probably what he absolutely can. And I guess you could say in one way that that's good, because less of the blame is on him, but then also, if the Red Bull car was upstandard, I guess you could easily see him winning Baku on a different day. He's definitely proven that multiple times before. So I guess we'll just have to hope that he can be closer to Verstappen, I suppose, as that's always the absolute measure that you can trust is your teammate, I suppose.
And I think Red Bull will be
realistic. You'll want it because it will take points of Norris if he's closer.
Oh, of course, yeah. But I think being realistic with Perez, even the Red Bull have to accept now, and I think they have accepted that their car is not as good as it was. So I think the merit on Perez losing that seat for 25, because it still is a possibility to me. I still don't think this one Baku race could save a seat. I think he still has to do one or two more good performances. But the merit of the position he has to reach. So Max isn't winning every race, so Perez doesn't have to come second or third to save his seat now. If Max is coming fourth, he just has to gain, I think, sixth, fifth, fourth, or third, for example. Like, the position for him is lower, and he's been consistently in the lower half of the top 10 for the season. So in the end, he's just got to continue performing like he was. It's a weird thing to think, I guess, but with Max dropping down, then to save his seat is maybe easier.
Yeah, it's kind of the relative performances need to be closer
that's
together.
The word I was looking for. I'm not Englishing very well today.
That's all right. Right. Final thing before we move on to the predictions, I think it's fair to do a rookie watch, or the two rookies that kind of came into the seats for the weekend. Well, I guess Colapinto's now been in the seat for it's only his second race, and Bearman's second race as well.
Exactly. It's great.
Both of whom did really well. Like, I genuinely, I'm going to be honest, did not have hopes for Colapinto. He has exceeded my expectations unbelievably.
Like, I know, he's so good.
He was running ahead of Alex Albon for the majority, all of the first half of the race. I think realistically, Albon was probably going to end up on a better strategy. Albon, by the way, brilliant race. Like that Williams in Baku was unbelievable in terms of relatively what they were able to do. But Colapinto, he ended, where did he finished 8th in the end.
Yeah, it was Alex got 7th and Colapinto got 8th. So Williams double points, gaining 10 points or 9 points on Haas now. Like that's.
I think they moved.
Now they're ahead of Alpine. Now they're ahead of Alpine in 8th in the constructors. And I think for Colapinto, this seems really unfair because he knows that he's going to be ditched by the end of the season, whatever happens, because you've got the Williams lineup confirmed for 2025, and he has probably exceeded what anyone ever thought he would, and demonstrated just what great consistent performances he can deliver with an F1 car. And I really hope that someone picks him up for either 2025 or 2026, because this is a talent that really deserves to be on the F1 grid in a definite seat for sure.
Yes. I think 26 is more reasonable because for me, the 25 Sauber seat has to go to Bortoleto at this point. McLaren have to release him. That's a different conversation for a different day. But that 25 seat, I don't think should go to Colapinto, but it is harsh on him. But it will just boost his confidence. Because at this point, any series would want him. So surely he could go somewhere else to a bit of racing next year. Then he's got such a good position. Two of the first 9 races that he's going to be in, he's done mega. And he's outperformed Alex in some ways. He qualified. Sure, Williams screwed up their strategy with qualifying with Alex, but he qualified ahead of Alex, got into Q3 in Baku. So I think this just puts him in such a good position to get a 26 seat, especially with the new regs. I think that's got to be a possibility.
Also, it's a bit beside the point, but he seems like a wonderful human being. Colapinto.
He does. His fight is so fun.
He's terminally online. And he seems to just idolize everyone on the grid, and I really like.
I know he said because didn't Lewis post about him? Lewis post about him, and then he was like, "Oh my god, best day of my life."
Yeah, I love seeing that because these drivers now are like chill. Like they were kids when Lewis Hamilton. They were essentially like us. They were kind of kids when Lewis Hamilton was kind of starting and driving, and then they're on the same grid as him. And they're basically like they are just starstruck, and I think it's nice that Hamilton seems to like really respect that and also want to kind of talk to them, introduce themselves. And apparently Colapinto has latched onto Charles Leclerc as well. I read somewhere.
Oh, nice!
It's now trying to like being besties with Leclerc. I do really
That's
like
so
him.
Cute.
I've
Everyone's favourite F1 couple right there, Leclerc and Colapinto.
As they should.
I didn't expect it. I just didn't expect him to be like so likable and honestly so good. Like he is. Yeah. He's really impressive, and
it's a shock because I don't know how good he was in F2. I wasn't following his F2 very.
I mean, F2 this year has been carnage. They've had about 15 different winners.
Yeah, exactly. But he's not being consistent. He wasn't making a name for himself like Antonelli and Bearman and Bortoleto, etc. And Hajar, like he hasn't been making a name for himself to that degree, but he's still part of the academy. So being brought into F1, sure, he didn't have much expectation. Just keeping it out of the wall, I think, would be good for him, which he has failed at. But besides the point, he's done so well, and I think this is just good for him, and also good for Bearman that they can both just have such a strong weekend, outperform established F1 drivers, and for lower down teams, be like, hey, look, you can rely on us rookies, because rookies in lower teams haven't had the greatest times in the past few years, I think it's fair to say. They've had a bit of a rough period. So to say we are reliable rookies, we will be good, we will get you points, is great for them. I'm happy to see it.
Yeah, and I guess we'll talk about Bearman now as well. Did get his 10th place finish. The first driver ever to score 2 points in his first 2 races for 2 different teams. To be fair, I don't know how many drivers fall into that category.
might actually be the first time that it's happened in F1 history, and so he's just starting off the record, but certainly very good.
You hold the record. If you start off the record, you hold it.
That is true.
but either way, did genuinely race with Lewis Hamilton, who, let's face it, didn't have the greatest performance. Or to gloss over that quickly.
Yeah, we won't talk about that. It's fine.
But yeah, he raced with Hamilton. Hamilton was had high praise for both Bearman and Colapinto, as mentioned, and I think again it just shows that both of them maybe do deserve to be on the grid. Obviously, Bearman has a seat next year. Colapinto doesn't at the moment, but if he keeps performing like this, I could very easily see him finding one. And this is posing a question for me: is that how good are the F2 grids? Because all three of them that are going to be, or two of them that are coming in, and then Colapinto as well, have been performing really well. And this raises the question that if these three aren't at the top of the F2 grid, how good are they at the moment? Because they seem like
pretty good.
There's a real question here.
I think that's the issue. We just haven't seen them come through as much. The past few years, the only, like, with Oscar, we knew he was really good. He was F2, like, F3 champion, F4, and he took the year's break and then was able to come on, sure. But for a lot of them, they just haven't had that chance. So there's the Red Bull juniors in F2, like Hajar and stuff, that haven't been able to progress because there's a certain Australian who's blocking the seat and a certain Mexican that's blocking the seat. But we haven't been able to see them progress. McLaren now have their driver lineup sorted, so Barletto is having to look elsewhere. Williams have their lineup sorted, so Colapinto. So I think it is the ones that have, like, they're signed to driver academies. They are very good. They will get chances in FP1s. But there probably are other drivers in F2 that are not signed to academies that could be really good. We just have no idea.
It's almost like we need more teams on the F1 grid.
That's crazy thought. I wonder who's
I vaguely recall there being a team that was trying to join the F1 grid and they weren't allowed to. It's weird, that one.
Yeah, no, maybe we should propose that to the FIA. I don't know whether they've thought about that before.
No, but the rookies, I mean, they, like, Bearman, perhaps, I think, fair to say, a little lucky to get points, but either way was competing.
He did it.
Yeah, either way did it and was competing for those kind of points positions. It was a great battle at the bottom end of the top 10 between, like, Alonso, the Williams, the Haas, Lewis Hamilton, who was also there.
I love tucking him in there.
I would also like to point out as well that with Bearman getting points, it does mean that I think Hulkenberg gets his approximately 60th, 11th place this season.
I think it was
once again missing out on points.
His 7th, 11th place, and I think it breaks the record for most, like, 1 position outside of the points. I think it was like Alboreto.
Very, very unlucky.
Yeah,
I'd say
like Alboreto in 1992, I think.
Yeah, because it was Yuki Tsunoda had that position for a long time. He loved his P11. He did.
Also, another fun fact: if Norris gets fast, because he got fastest lap at this race as well, if he gets fastest lap in Singapore, he will become the first driver to set 4 consecutive fastest laps since Kimi Räikkönen in 2008.
I'm gonna come back at your fun fact with another fun fact.
Oh.
Did you know who was the fastest pit stop this race?
I saw it was
Sauber. Oh my god, they've done it.
Well done.
After like 10-second pit stops at the start of the season, they've sorted it out.
Okay, but what was the time?
3.32.
Yeah, because all the pit stops weren't great this race, I can't lie.
Yeah, they weren't. Even Red Bull's pit stops have fallen off. What happened to that team?
That team's fallen off. What a shame. I'm so upset. That's crazy.
No, I do want Norris to get fastest lap now, because then that makes my stat worthwhile.
Max tried to get it. So Norris overtook Max legitimately on track, and then Max immediately pitted for soft tyres, and then boom. So, thank God.
That's a 2-point swing that could be crucial at the end of the season. Well, we'll have to wait and see for that. It's a few weeks away.
Yeah, it is. But it's just, there's so many little stories from Baku that have been so good. We've covered so many tiny things. Sure, there was the big ones, but so many drivers did really well. We haven't even touched on Alpine being horrendous and the Lance Stroll and Yuki Tsunoda incident. Like, there's so much to talk about with this race.
That Stroll and Tsunoda one's just a lap one for me. That's just someone sticking their nose up and someone not appreciating the fact that there is a nose there, and just it ends badly.
I'm just thankful that Lando got out of the way, because it easily could have been him. As soon as he was starting around the Tsunoda and Stroll bit, I was thankful.
Right. We're going to Singapore, famously a place where there have been no front row crashes in recent years.
Well, that's fine. Lando won't qualify on the front row anyway.
He'll lose positions, but he'll drop from P1 to P20 as he's taken out by someone.
Shut up! Does that even count? No.
Oh yeah, that definitely counts.
No. If you DNF on the first lap, doesn't count.
It does.
Doesn't.
He loses positions.
No, because you don't. That's not how it works.
He just needs to get out of lap 1 when he starts on pole
in
P1.
On the first corner in Monza, he gained places.
Yeah, and on
he
the
held
last
his place.
And where
he held his place.
Where was he at the last corner in Monza lap 1?
His teammate was an asshole.
Well, I think maybe Singapore will be the place that he can do it. But we'll move on now, because I think we finished with Baku. A lot of good stories, as Katch was saying there. We'll move on to our predictions. And Callum, unless I'm very much mistaken, you should have those with you. The two Wills last week, so myself and Will Biddles made Katch's predictions, and then Callum and Chinmay made their own predictions as well. So, Callum, what have we got for the predictions that were made?
Well, so Katch, I'll run through your the predictions that both Wills made for you. So this was kind of alternating, weren't they? For example, Wilkins would pick P1, and then Will Biddles would pick P2, etc. So you actually got the top two the wrong way round. So you went with Leclerc P1 and Piastri P2. Hang on, it gets better, Katch. It gets better.
Oh, great.
It does. No, it does indeed. So Norris was P3, obviously was P4. Hamilton, I don't think Wilkins wants to get into that anymore. And Russell P5, he was obviously got the last place on the podium. So that's 4 points from the top 5.
To be fair, I wouldn't have predicted Leclerc to win, I don't think, so...
I just went for it because Will likes Leclerc. And to be fair, it was looking good for at least the first 20 laps.
Yeah. It was nearly there.
Yeah.
I think certainly. Well, I think Piastri was out of the question because that's what Chinmay picked. I think that's what I would have gone for if I was able to, and if I had first pick. But so 1 point prediction was Lando loses places in turn 1. He didn't this time. He actually, I thought, did very well off the start.
I can't believe you guys would have done that for me. How dare you?
That's true. We should have. I didn't
consider that.
How dare you?
It was actually quite rude to Katch and being a McLaren fan. I'm not taking any of the blame for this. This is all on Will Kingswood and Will Biddles.
No, that was Will Biddles. That was Biddles. That one.
There's going to be some aggressive messages coming Will Biddles' way. Then for a 2 point prediction, we had 3 plus DNF / pit stops on lap 1 from damage. I don't think we had any. I think we had Lance Stroll who came in, and that was it.
Yeah.
But the 3 point prediction is that Colapinto and Bearman score points, and both of them did. So that is the 3 point prediction secured as well. So that is 8 points for Katch. And so
probably more than all of my own predictions combined.
And so that is you move up to 104, which is we'll see how that compares in a little while. I'll run through Chinmay's predictions as well. So he had first pick, so he went with Piastri first, so that is a very correct prediction. And wow, he picked Leclerc second as well, which is brilliant. Then picked Norris third, Hamilton fourth, and Sainz fifth. So that is 7 points from his top 5. Very impressive. And then we have no team finishes consecutively in the points as his 1 point prediction. I don't think we had that, did we? In the points. No, Williams did do that.
Oh, yeah.
So he doesn't get that one. At least 3 red flags across the weekend. I think we had that in FP1. So that's secured. And then we had Perez out qualifies and beats Verstappen in the race for the 3-pointer. We almost had that until lap 50, and then that went away. So that is 9 points from Chinmay. That's very impressive.
Good week.
Yeah. And so that puts him on to 107. So just 3 points ahead of Katch. And then I'll go through mine. So I haven't actually looked at my predictions. So I went with Sainz first place. I don't know why. I have a soft spot for Sainz. That did not work out, obviously. Went with Norris P2. That did not happen. Piastri P3. I was wrong about the order of the McLaren drivers. Leclerc P4 and Verstappen P5. So I think that is 4 points, if I'm not mistaken. 4 drivers correct in the top 5, but none of them in the right order.
Verstappen was P5.
Yeah.
Oh yes, Verstappen was P5. Oh, perfect. I'll take that. So that's 6 points then. 6 points from my top 5. And then we have 1 point prediction is a driver crashes at the castle section at some point in the weekend. I was very surprised that I think all drivers got out unscathed from that one.
Wait, the castle section in the whole weekend, I swear.
Did we have someone that...
And I don't think there was.
Was that just outside the castle section they did their crashes? Must be.
Yeah, it was kind of all over the place. There was Bearman at turn 1, Leclerc at turn 14, I think.
Yeah,
they kind of spread them around. Also, I feel like if you see someone crash at the castle section, they're getting memed. So the fact that I didn't see any memes.
Yeah.
Leclerc came to mind, so I was maybe hoping of a repeat of the I am stupid moments, but unfortunately that did not happen. 2+ safety cars / VSCs in the race. We didn't get that. We only got a VSC by the end, so that's not good either. And then 15 or less drivers finished the race. We almost got that. We had 4 DNFs, Tsunoda, Stroll, and then Sainz and Perez. So, none of my... So only 6 points from all coming from my top 5. And that puts me level on points with Chinmay. So it's me and Chinmay on 107 and Katch just behind on 104. Still very close.
It is.
Perfect. Right. Well, that has brought us to the end of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix review. Well, Callum and Katch will be back next week to talk about the Singapore Grand Prix back in the studio with all its crystal clear audio quality. I unfortunately won't be returning. My time at university has ended, but
you've got the Singapore preview.
Yes. Yep, I got
that we're about to. But yes, apart from that,
Singapore preview. But no, I might be back on a few episodes when they go back online over Christmas. But thank you to Callum and Katch for all of the help over the last year, and of course, thank you to Will, Chinmay, and Jack Rowe for helping out with the show. I think it has been probably one of the things I most enjoyed about university, and I started it with a Verstappen title battle. I'm ending it maybe with a Verstappen title battle as well, and yeah, it's definitely been a season this year that has become a lot more enjoyable, and obviously being able to talk about it has been really fun. But yeah, as ever, thank you to Callum and Katch for coming on today. I've been Will Kingswood, your host, and yeah, thank you for listening.